So before I started generating ideas for the game, I needed to know what platform kids mostly play on because there's no point, say, creating a in-depth strategy game that most people would prefer to play on a PC, and then find out that most of the players prefer to play on console. So I did some research into that, and I found one article from Statistica that said 46% of American children play on mobile platforms. So I thought that was just an easy choice there. And from myself, uh, I spoke to a couple of friends, and they have younger brothers and sisters that play a lot of games on mobile too. So I decided to go forward with that. And from there, I decided to look at the top grossing, most downloaded apps on a mobile platform. I only looked at Google Play Android platform because I don't have an iPhone and I couldn't access the Apple Play Store on my computer. And then I found that games like Pokemon Go, Roblox, Genshin Impact, Candy Crush, and those big name games were all the most downloaded and top grossing games on the platform. Uh, yeah, those were Clash of Clans too, were the five games within the top 20 grossing section. I did not one to five because one to five were all quite similar, so I decided to stretch the search area to find some more variety in what people play. So one game that I could create is a Candy Crush match three game, but from things that I've learned in the past, that's played mostly by older audiences. I think 40 to 50 age range is who mostly play that game. So I could create that, but that wouldn't appeal to my audience too much. So generating games ideas. Uh, deciding what I deciding what I'm going to do is a simple process that I can do through various means like artistic innovation or serendipitous. But I decided to go with a mind map to lay out what's popular on platform on mobile platform and then uh, work out some genres from there. So here you see so for mobile games I've got resource management games and then from there is Rise of Empires, Clash of Clans, which also leads into strategy games like Balloons Tower Defense. And up over here there's Match 3, like Candy Crush and Peggle, which isn't a Match 3, but it's in the same sort of genre. And there's hidden object games, puzzle games, and physics games and endless runner games. And I decided to go along the line of physics games. As I thought it would be quite an interesting arcadey design that I could make quite simple and enjoyable to my audience. And in the basic game sections, you've got games like Cut the Rope, Angry Birds, Jetpack Joyride. When it comes to creating a game for a target platform, it's important to know what genres are popular on that platform, which is why I went through that process there of going through what's popular on the platform and expanding out from there and look at what genres those games would fit into. And so for my game, I was my intent to go for a physics game similar to Angry Birds. Uh, does everyone know Angry Birds? You have a sunshine, you fire it, and knock buildings down. Uh, because it's, I imagine it was quite popular with the 8 to 10 ranges. To the people to my friends that I spoke about there, younger brothers and sisters, they have Angry Birds downloaded on their phone or other basic games like that. And when I was 8 to 10, which wasn't that long ago, I did enjoy Angry Birds quite a bit. So, mechanics in the game. Angry Birds is quite a simple game. Like you can't get more complicated with the spin-off games like the Star Wars game where you have gravity fields and the like. But I was keeping it simple and arcadey for this game, and so You have a slingshot you use to fire projectiles, to knock down buildings, and destroy enemies. And once all the enemies are destroyed, you complete the level, and then you get a 3-star rating. And that the main aim of replaying that is getting that high star rating. So, the design of the game. The way the game looks plays a massive part on its audience. More realistic 3D game isn't going to appeal to children, as from research that I've done. They're more likely to prefer a cartoon style game. That's on a different blog page, which is unfortunate, but the design of the game is outlined in the GDD. So, on the first page, there's just a brief summary outlining that the game is a physics-based arcade game where you're just using different tools to destroy structures in points and low time to earn a high rating. Levels are built out of rubbish bottles, cardboard, and nothing apparently. So, brief outline of what the game is. Genre is just a physics-based arcade game targeted to 8 to 10-year-old children, just non-gender specific. Monetization is just free to play with no microtransactions, just fully free to play. And the platforms it's on, it's IM, but with how the game is made, you can play that on both PC and on your phone. The mechanics are outlined here. You have the slingshot, different tool types, you have projectiles, destructible structures, enemies, score timer, and rating. So the tools or the projectiles the player can use is what changes up gameplay. I designed 4 briefly, just off things that I thought my audience would find interesting, such as pebbles is just like a basic projectile. There's fun snap-on things where you throw them on the ground and make a bang as like a explosive projectile, and like the blackbird and Angry Birds, and skewers and confetti. The environment. The game takes place around several 5 different locations where some children have just set up bits of rubbish like tin cans and bottles and just knocking them down with a slingshot. The enemies, uh, the enemies are just following the same line of throwing away toys. So you have the green army men toys or board game miniatures. The game doesn't have a story, but it does have a basis. So I mentioned it earlier. The basis of the game is that it's just a few kids who are out in the streets just looking for something to pass the time, and then building up these structures made out of bits of rubbish and then knocking them down. Visuals of the game are all quite simple, pixel artists, so that they can run on a wide variety of phones, which will be the intended platform for the game. So you can play this game on any phone that can run Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or anything like that. The objective of the game is for the player to knock down structures, earn points by destroying all the enemies, and doing that in the quickest time. So the game mechanics, main mechanics of the game are the slingshot and projectile systems, as well as the score rating system, which is the main thing that get the player to replay the game. The rating system would follow a mathematical solution of taking the time in seconds. Each second, the timer goes up by one, and then the maximum points that the player has, and then dividing that by 10, I think it is, which gives you the rating, and then you can replay the game and try and beat your rating again. So enemies instance variable when they get hit by a projectile, it goes down by 1, and when it reaches 0, they die, and you get the score, which is 20 points. The different tools the player can use do different damage, which is why the enemies are on an instance variable rather than just on collision with the projectile destroy it. But that's not important to the game. Well, to this. But the input systems, as I mentioned a bit earlier now, the player can play the game on PC with a mouse by just clicking and dragging, or with touch controls, so you'll just like drag and release, and then the projectile fires. And that was so that the game is playable on the mobile platform, rather than just having a game targeted towards the mobile platform, but it not be playable on there. And the structure of the game is what the player is going to be spending most of the time destroying. 3 different types, and then for those 3 different types, to add some more visual difference to the game, I created some variations of what those are. As you can see in the GTD, there's a kind of Pepsi, a kind of Coke, and a kind of Monster, essentially, to give the player something different to look at rather than just the same thing over and over. And the sound design of the game, it's simple. You just sound design of the game is just a list of the different tools, the structures, and what sound effects those would need. So there's the pebble, you can need to have a hit sound effect, a slingshot, you need a sound effect like it fires a projectile. And that's it. So I moved on to creating the art for the game before I started producing the actual game, and that's so I can get an idea of the height and width of each of the template pixels. So that it will make a production of the game easier, because there's no point in creating the game then creating the art, because then you might have to change the game based on how you make the art. So here you can see the 3 different cam designs again, and I created the wood boards. You've got just a 2x4 block, and then a chipboard, which ended up looking more like a desert camo. And as the glass bottles, which I had a bit of fun with, instead of a bottle of rum, there's rum. Just make myself laugh pretty much. And it was the slingshot. I just made the basic slingshot that was homemade, rough, a twig and rubber band. And that shouldn't be there, but the production schedule. I outlined everything that the game needed, and I was just going to work through it as I went. And then it was just based on, well, for example, projectiles need to respond to physics items. There's your structures, so when a pebble hits a board, it needs to bounce off. So for that, I need to be able to fire the pebble, and enemies destroyed on collision. Well, before I do that, it would be a better idea to have something for the enemies to stand on. So I did that. A score. Well, there's no point of having a score system without enemies or structures to add to the score. That's how I went through development. I made a rough sketch of what the game will look like. Where it was just basically slingshot with the pebble. You would fire that at the enemies, and then I sent that to some people asking for some feedback. So I received some feedback. Most of it was that the screen looked too empty. So I added this section down here for the player to choose what projectiles they are going to fire, because I was going to have the game just on a rotation of you shoot a pebble, then you shoot a skewer, and so on. So I did this so that if the player is going to fire a pebble, and they went, no, I'd rather use a one snap on, so you can just click on that with the mouse or the finger on the phone, and then it would just change the projectile to that, and then they could fire that. So then I moved on to production. Here is a process of early production of me creating the initial swing effect, so that's dragging back the projectile, is firing the projectile. And the health system experimenting with bigger structures. So, the video outlines the first 3 hours of development of the game. I was just going through the list that I made earlier, adding a projectile system where you hold it back, you can see that it's held back, and then it fires, and adding in the structures that I made earlier, adding it so that they fall over and that the pebble reacts to the structure being hit, and then so on. But I sent that video off to some people asking for feedback. The video was quite poor quality, but I fixed that in the next one, I believe. And so I just listened to their feedback. Just here, the main piece of feedback that the 3 people that I managed to get a reply from were all the game was too small. So I made this merged the viewport and the scene so that it was a full display, so you can play the game lengthways on your mobile, which is a preferable way to play games on the phone. And then, other than responding to that feedback and making the screen larger, I finished adding in the rest of the structures. But I got the save and I quit, so I have to do them all again. So after doing that, so after listening to some feedback and adding in the rest of the structures, I moved on to the enemies. I made the pixel art sprite for Green Army Man, and then that was just add some more visual to the player. And after I put the enemies in, I put that version of the game, which was more complete than the prototype from the video earlier, onto itch, and I sent that to some more people for feedback. And I got quite a bit more feedback on this one. My main concern was with the respawn time for the projectiles. I had it when you fire the pebble, the game would wait 5 seconds, destroy the pebble, then place the pebble back on the slingshot. I was concerned that it would be too long for the player, as it was just it hits, everything falls down, and the game pretty much frozen for a few seconds whilst you can't do anything. The only person who responded to that question was that they liked it. It showed that it waited until the motion of the structures falling down and the pebble to stop moving, and it gave time for the player to see what they were working with, because at that time I didn't have the game on one screen. It was extended so that when the pebble went out of out of what you can see here, so then left over here, the screen would continue on. But I changed that. I changed that later on. I've got quite a large piece of feedback here about the weight of the objects, the projectile speed, and I listened to that and I changed the weight and density of like a can and a wood board, so that rather than just being the same physics object, the can would respond more like a can would, and the wood board would respond like a wood board would. It feels like the blocks are heavy and I'm too light, if you get what I mean. The player would make an impact on some blocks, but if they were in a structure, it would just knock the structure slightly and not always knock it down. So I changed those settings around a bit, and then I moved on. The sling animation, it was just 2 frames. The stationary one was just the normal slingshot, and when the player clicked, it would just play the second picture from earlier, where it was just the same angle all the time. I couldn't manage to fix that, but I did try to fix that by adding some code, but it just didn't work, and the pebble ended up shooting straight up for some reason. Yeah, I finished acting on that feedback and moved on to creating the projectiles, the main other way of playing the game. That didn't work out as well as I hoped. Yeah. You fire it and then it just doesn't do anything. It was just it didn't work how I wanted it to work. So I tried some few ways of changing that, the way that the projectile is fired from the slingshot, and changing the emulation physics settings in the engine, but I just couldn't get the long projectile like that to work, so I decided making the fun snap projectile as I thought using a shape more resembling the pebble would make it work easier. And if I go back onto this video, yeah, you can see there's a rough blue box there. It says skewer. And the idea is to work on the feedback that I had earlier of the screen being blank down here. So I just put a box here that when you click on that, it would change the projectile to the skewer. When I was making the fun snap bomb, I made this just to give a bit more visual elements to the player. So I made the snap bomb projectile on the box, and then I tried to get that to work in the game too, and that didn't work either. It was just way too fast, and no matter how much I changed any of the settings, the density, the air friction or anything like that, it wouldn't respond how the pebble would, even though they're on the same physics settings. It just wouldn't work. So I just decided to cut the extra projectiles as not only were they breaking, not only did they not work themselves when I added in the fun snap bomb, swapping between that and the pebble just wouldn't work. The pebble would just fall to the floor rather than firing. I wasn't sure what caused that. I tried pinning the pebble to the slingshot, but it just wouldn't work. So I'd rather have a game that works than a game that doesn't. So I decided to cut those to keep the game working. Yeah, but even though I didn't add the mechanic that I wanted in the form of projectiles, I was able to listen to the feedback of people who played it and act on that and make the game more enjoyable for my audience rather than me. So after listening to that feedback and cutting out the main mechanic, I decided to move on to the audio of the game to take my mind off it. So I started looking at backing tracks for the game, and I was see the thing act as the backing track for the environment of the game. You can hear that now. It's, to give it a more arcadey feel. And, so after searching for a little bit, I found these two, and I was to give it a more arcade gamey mobile game feel. So between the two options, I went with the first one as it just sounded easier on the ears, as the second one was a bit more trombone and bassy, and the first one was a bit more upbeat. So I thought that would be more appropriate for the arcade game that I was going for. Yeah. I added in the soundtrack, but I had a bug where when the player restarted the game, none of the sounds flowed. So I had to work with the things that I haven't done with. I had to work with things I haven't worked with before, such as the save games. The way I had it set up is that when you defeated all the enemies and clicked on the replay button, it would restart the level, restart the layout, which repositions all of the enemies and structures, but it would stop playing the audio and not restart it. So I had to. So I was stuck on that for a little bit, but I tried using the save game and reloading the game and restarting the layout, which worked. Well, I'm not really sure why that worked, but at least it did. But from that, the development was done for the game. I acted on the feedback that I had earlier, added in the rest of the sound effects, and then there's a brief summary of how I found the production went. Click on this around here. Is the playable version of the game. There's a few things to point out before I do, and that was this bottle here. If I just restart the game, it's supposed to fall when the game starts. You can see here. That was to well, the target audience is younger players, and I may be overestimating how dumb they might be, but that was to show the players that you knock things over in the game. So, I won't play through the game at the end, but as you can see, you knock things over, kill enemies, and then there's sound effects for all the collisions, and so on. There's a point system, and when you can finish the level, but that's it. Any questions?